A billionaire's son had everything, except success. He failed every exam, until a black janitor revealed a secret that changed his life forever. The mansion gates opened and the sleek Bentley rolled out, its polished black surface gleaming under the morning sun. Inside sat Lucas Whitmore, heir to a fortune greater than some nations' economies, yet carrying the heavy burden of failure. As the car pulled up to the prestigious university, students turned their heads instantly, not in admiration, but in whispers of mockery. Lucas adjusted his designer blazer, his sunglasses hiding the storm in his eyes. He looked every bit the prince of wealth, but inside, he was breaking apart. 4 months, he had been failing every test, every exam, every expectation. Professors spoke of him in hushed tones, classmates ridiculed him, and his father, William Whitmore, had made his disappointment loud and clear. Just the night before, at the long marble dining table, his father's voice had cut him deeper than any insult. "You carry my name, Lucas, but you are no Whitmore. You're nothing but a disgrace." The words echoed like chains around his heart. Tutors had come and gone, all paid fortunes, yet none could fix what was broken inside him. Lucas wasn't just failing in school, he was failing himself. And no amount of money, no luxury car, no private chef could hide the truth. As he stepped through the grand university gates that morning, the laughter of his peers followed him like shadows he couldn't escape. He didn't know it yet, but the answer to his misery wouldn't come from another expensive tutor, nor from his powerful father's influence. It would come from someone the world ignored every single day. A janitor. A man with no wealth, no status, yet holding a secret that could turn failure into triumph. If this beginning gripped you, smash the like button right now and comment "I want the secret." Lucas walked into the lecture hall, his chest tight with dread. The professor handed back the latest exam, and there it was again. A massive red F sprawled across the page like a wound for everyone to see. Snickers rippled through the room, and a cruel voice from the back whispered just loud enough for him to hear, "Billionaire's brain is bankrupt." Lucas gritted his teeth, forcing himself not to react, but inside he wanted to disappear. The humiliation burned hotter than fire. He stormed out of the class, his expensive shoes pounding against the marble corridor, when he saw him again, the janitor. Bent over a mop, humming an old tune, his movements calm and precise, as though cleaning the floor was an art. Most students ignored him, but today Lucas couldn't. His anger spilled over. "What are you staring at, old man? You think my life is funny too?" The janitor paused, leaned on his mop, and looked him straight in the eye. His voice was deep, steady, and filled with quiet power. "No, son. I just see a young man who walks like a king, but carries the eyes of a prisoner." The words pierced through Lucas like a blade. He stood frozen, unable to speak. Nobody had ever said something like that to him, not teachers, not tutors, not even his father. For a moment, Lucas felt naked, exposed, as if this janitor could see through his carefully built mask of arrogance. He quickly turned away, pretending the words hadn't touched him, but deep inside, they echoed louder than the laughter of his classmates. He didn't know it yet, but that one sentence would be the spark that changed his destiny. Do you want to know what secret this janitor holds? Smash the like button and comment "I'm ready." That night, Lucas tossed and turned in his massive bedroom, the silk sheets offering no comfort. His father's words still echoed, "You are the family's disgrace." But louder than even that was the janitor's voice, "You walk like a king, but carry the eyes of a prisoner." It gnawed at him. How could a man with a mop cut through him deeper than all the expensive tutors in the world? By morning, curiosity and pride pushed him back to the university earlier than usual. As he entered the corridor, the same janitor was there, humming that same tune, as if nothing in the world could disturb his peace. Lucas walked up, trying to mask his uncertainty with arrogance. "You think you're some kind of philosopher," he sneered. The janitor smiled faintly, leaned on his mop, and said, "No. I'm just a man who learned life the hard way. And I see you're failing not because you're stupid, but because you've never been taught the secret to learning." Lucas scoffed, "Secret? Don't tell me mopping floors teaches you about passing exams." The janitor's eyes sharpened. "It teaches me discipline. It teaches me patience. It teaches me focus. 3 things you lack. If you want to change your life, meet me here tomorrow. 6 a.m. sharp. I'll show you something your father's money can't buy." Lucas let out a bitter laugh. Why would I take advice from a janitor? But as he turned to leave, the man's voice followed him. "You can laugh, son, but if you don't show up, you'll keep failing, not just in school, but in life." Lucas clenched his fists. For the first time, Someone wasn't begging to help him because of his father's money. This man didn't care who he was, and that made the challenge impossible to ignore. Should Lucas show up at 6 a.m.? Smash like and comment meet him. The following morning, the campus was silent. The sun had barely risen, and the air was crisp with the chill of dawn. Lucas yawned as he checked his watch, 6:05 a.m. He almost turned back, annoyed at himself for even coming, when he saw the janitor already at work, pushing his mop slowly across the marble floor. "You're late," the janitor said without looking up. Lucas frowned. "It's only 5 minutes." The janitor's voice remained calm. 5 minutes late today, 10 minutes late tomorrow, a lifetime late in the end. Success doesn't wait. Lucas rolled his eyes but followed him down the empty corridor. "So what's this secret you keep bragging about?" The janitor dipped the mop into a bucket and began scrubbing the floor with precise, steady strokes. "The secret," he said, "is hidden in this mop." Lucas nearly laughed. "Are you kidding me?" The janitor looked up, his eyes sharp. "This mop moves one stroke at a time, steady, focused, never rushing. If I swing it carelessly, the floor stays dirty. But if I move with patience, the floor shines. Learning works the same way. You fail because you rush, you cram, you pretend to listen while your mind is elsewhere. You don't focus. You don't respect the process." Lucas stood silently, watching the rhythmic motions. For the first time, he noticed how spotless the floor behind the janitor was, gleaming under the pale sunlight. "So you're saying cleaning floors is like studying?" he asked. The janitor smiled. "No, son. I'm saying life is like cleaning floors. Step by step. Stroke by stroke. Attention. Patience. Discipline. That's the secret to passing any test." Something stirred inside Lucas. For once, he wasn't being lectured with fancy words or charts, just a mop and a truth that felt undeniable. Do you believe this janitor is right? Smash the like button and comment discipline is power, if you agree. Lucas returned the next morning, not in a tailored suit this time, but in a hoodie and sneakers. He didn't want anyone to see him. The janitor was already there, as always, humming that same tune, the mop gliding across the floor like a dance. "Good," the janitor said without looking up. "You came back." Lucas crossed his arms. "I'm here, but don't think I'm going to mop floors." The janitor chuckled. "Then you'll never learn. Pick up the mop." Reluctantly, Lucas grabbed the wooden handle, its weight awkward in his soft hands. He dipped it in the bucket and dragged it sloppily across the marble. The janitor shook his head. "No. Slow down. Watch your strokes. Each line must overlap the last, no space left dirty. Focus." Lucas tried again, irritation bubbling inside him. "This is stupid. How is this supposed to help me pass an exam?" The janitor's voice was steady. "Because your mind wanders, your hands rush, and your pride blinds you. To succeed, you must control all three." Hours passed. Lucas's arms ached, his back hurt, sweat dripped down his forehead, but the floor slowly began to gleam. For the first time, he saw a result born not of wealth, not of his family name, but of his own effort. When he finally dropped the mop, panting, the janitor looked at him with quiet satisfaction. "That," he said, "is your first lesson. Patience. If you can endure this, you can endure studying. Knowledge is not learned in a rush. It's built slowly, like shining a floor until it reflects the light." Lucas sat on the cold marble, exhausted but strangely proud. Deep inside, a spark had been lit. Do you think Lucas can handle more of these tests? Smash like and comment keep going, Lucas. By the third morning, Lucas felt the soreness in his arms before he even stepped into the hallway. The janitor was waiting, mop already in hand. "Today," he said calmly, "we won't mop. We'll clean the windows." Lucas frowned. "Windows? You're kidding me. Do you know who I am? I don't clean windows." The janitor's gaze was steady. "And that pride of yours is the very chain holding you down. Until you break it, you'll always be a prisoner of your own ego." Lucas bristled. Nobody spoke to him like that, not professors, not tutors, not even his father's business partners. He was always treated like someone special, even in failure. But here was this janitor, treating him like he was ordinary. Lucas grabbed the cloth angrily. "Fine. I'll clean your stupid windows." He pressed the rag against the glass, wiping in fast, messy circles. Streaks smeared across the pane, and frustration rose in his chest. "See? It doesn't even work." The janitor stepped beside him and moved the rag in slow, straight motions, overlapping lines just as he had with the mop. The glass began to clear, sunlight breaking through in golden beams. Your problem, the janitor said, is you think speed equals power. But power comes from precision. Pride rushes. Discipline waits. Lucas clenched his jaw and forced himself to copy the movements. Slowly, painfully, the glass transformed from cloudy to spotless. As the light streamed in, he caught his reflection, sweaty, tired, humbled. And for the first time, he didn't hate the image staring back. He felt lighter. The janitor smiled knowingly. That's lesson 2. Pride blinds. Humility clears the view. Lucas didn't respond, but inside, something shifted. The chains of arrogance were loosening, link by link. Do you think Lucas can truly let go of his pride? Smash like and comment no pride, just progress. The next day, Lucas arrived before dawn. His hoodie was pulled low over his face, not from shame anymore, but to hide the strange eagerness growing inside him. The janitor was already waiting, seated on a bench with an old, battered notebook in his hands. Today, he said, tapping the cover, we won't clean floors or windows. Today, we clean your mind. Lucas raised an eyebrow. And how do you plan to do that? With a notebook that looks like it's from the Stone Age? The janitor chuckled. This notebook has more power than all your father's wealth. Inside it are lessons I learned the hard way, through failures, struggles, and survival. If you're ready, open it. Hesitant but curious, Lucas took the notebook. The pages were filled with crooked handwriting, quotes, and diagrams. At the top of the first page were 3 bold words: focus, discipline, patience. Beneath them, a line read, a sharp mind is not born, it's trained, one thought at a time. Lucas flipped through, finding exercises, small puzzles, and notes that forced him to think differently. They weren't like the textbooks he hated. These were challenges that required focus, like cleaning a floor or wiping a window. He frowned, working through a problem, and after struggling for minutes, finally cracked it. His chest tightened, not from frustration this time, but from a strange thrill. He had solved it. On his own. The janitor nodded. That's lesson 3. Learning is not about memorizing, it's about engaging. When your mind struggles, it grows stronger. That's why you failed before, you never let yourself struggle, only escape. Lucas stared at the notebook with new respect. For the first time in his life, he felt like learning could be his. Not forced, not bought, not demanded, his. Do you think this notebook can truly change Lucas's life? Smash like and comment Notebook of Truth, if you're ready. On the 8th morning, Lucas found the janitor waiting in the library instead of the hallway. The old man sat at a wooden table, the notebook closed in front of him. Sit, he said firmly. Lucas obeyed, curious. What's today's lesson? He asked. The janitor leaned forward. Today, we test your mind in silence. Lucas frowned. Silence? That's it? What kind of test is that? The janitor's eyes narrowed. The hardest kind. You've been distracted your whole life, phones buzzing, parties calling, people mocking, wealth shielding you. You've never sat still long enough to face your own thoughts. If you can't master silence, you can't master knowledge. Lucas leaned back, smirking. Easy. I can sit in silence. But 10 minutes later, he was restless. His leg bounced, his fingers tapped the table, his mind screamed with noise. The janitor watched patiently. See? Your own thoughts fight you. You want distraction, not focus. But exams, life, even success, they demand you to sit in the storm and remain still. Lucas clenched his fists, forcing himself to stop fidgeting. Seconds dragged into minutes. He stared at the grain of the wooden table, the dust motes floating in the sun, the faint tick of the clock. Slowly, the chaos in his head softened. His breathing steadied. For the first time in years, he wasn't running from his own mind, he was listening to it. An hour later, the janitor finally spoke. That is lesson 4. Silence sharpens the blade of the mind. Without it, you swing wildly and cut nothing. With it, you strike with precision. Lucas blinked, surprised at the calm that had settled inside him. He wasn't just learning how to study, he was learning how to be. Could you last an hour in silence? Smash like and comment silence is strength. The next morning, Lucas walked into the hallway expecting another mop or notebook exercise. Instead, the janitor stood beside a tall blackboard covered with red X marks. What's this? Lucas asked, staring at the dozens of failures scrawled across the board. The janitor's voice was steady. "These are your grades, every exam you've failed since you arrived here. I had the records pulled. Today, you will face them." Lucas's face turned hot. Shame tightened his throat. He wanted to turn away, but the janitor's firm hand on his shoulder held him in place. "You can't outrun failure," the janitor said. "It follows until you confront it." Lucas's fists clenched. "Why humiliate me like this? Don't you think I already know I'm a failure?" The janitor shook his head. "No. You believe you are a failure. But failure is not identity, it's instruction. Every X on this board is a teacher. Look at them. What do they tell you?" Lucas stared at the red marks. At first, all he saw was defeat. But then, he noticed patterns. Every failed test had something in common. He had rushed, skipped instructions, guessed without thinking. His mistakes weren't proof of stupidity, they were proof of negligence. He whispered, "I never really tried." The janitor smiled faintly. "Exactly. Lesson 5, failure is not the end, it is the beginning, if you have the courage to learn from it." Lucas touched the chalkboard, tracing the lines of the red excess. For the first time, he didn't feel crushed by them. He felt challenged. Deep down, a flame burned brighter, the will to rewrite the board with victories. Would you dare face your own failures written out in red? Smash like and comment "Failure Teaches." That night, long after most students had gone to sleep, Lucas received a message slipped under his dorm door. In rough handwriting, it read, "Meet me in the old lecture hall at midnight. Come ready." Lucas's heart pounded. He knew it was from the janitor. He arrived to find the vast room dimly lit, the chalkboard waiting, and the janitor seated quietly with the worn notebook in his lap. "Tonight," the janitor said, "you will take a test. Not from your professors, this one is from me." Lucas froze. Tests were his nightmare, his curse. His pulse quickened, but something inside him told him not to run this time. He sat down, and the janitor slid a sheet of paper across the desk. It wasn't multiple choice, and it wasn't memorization. Instead, it was filled with thought puzzles, logical patterns, and problems that required patience and focus, the very skills the janitor had been drilling into him. At first, Lucas panicked. His hand shook as he read the first question. He wanted to give up. But then he remembered the mop strokes, the slow wiping of glass, the silence in the library. He breathed deeply. One problem at a time. Minutes became hours. The old lecture hall echoed with the sound of chalk scratching as Lucas worked furiously but calmly, refusing to quit. When he reached the final question, sweat dripped from his brow, but his focus was sharper than ever. He wrote the answer, set down his pencil, and looked up. The janitor was smiling, not because Lucas had solved them all correctly, but because he hadn't surrendered. "That is lesson 6, the janitor said. "Victory is not the absence of mistakes, it is the refusal to quit." Lucas sat back, exhausted but glowing with pride. For the first time in his life, he felt worthy. Could you push through a midnight challenge like Lucas? Smash like and comment "Never quit." The morning after the midnight test, Lucas was summoned to the Whitmore mansion. His father's towering figure stood at the head of the long marble dining table, arms crossed, eyes like cold steel. "I've been hearing things," William Whitmore said sharply. "Rumors that you've been sneaking around with a janitor." The word dripped with disdain, as though it was filth on his tongue. Lucas swallowed hard. "He's not just a janitor, father. He's been teaching me lessons no one else ever could." William slammed his fist onto the table, the sound echoing like thunder. "Lessons? From a man who scrubs floors? You're a Whitmore. You don't stoop to their level, you command from above." Lucas's hands trembled, but then he remembered the silence test, the notebook, the wall of failures. He took a deep breath. "Maybe that's why I've been failing, father. Because I've only ever been above. I've never learned what it means to start from below." William's face reddened with anger. "You're throwing away your future chasing the advice of some nobody." Lucas stood taller now, his voice firm. "He's not a nobody. He's the first person who's shown me how to stand on my own 2 feet." For a moment, the mansion was silent. The clash between power and humility, pride and growth, hung heavy in the air. Finally, William sneered. "Fine. If this janitor is such a great teacher, prove it. Ace the next exam. If you fail, I'll cut you off completely. No inheritance, no empire, no second chances." The challenge struck Lucas like lightning. But instead of fear, a fire burned in him. For the first time, he welcomed the test. Would you dare stand up to someone as powerful as William Whitmore? Smash like and comment, stand tall. Exam day arrived like a storm. Students whispered as Lucas Whitmore walked into the hall, no longer the arrogant rich boy in expensive sunglasses, but a young man carrying something unseen, calm. He sat down, the paper placed before him, the ticking clock reminding him of every past failure. For a moment, doubt tried to creep in. But then he closed his eyes and heard the janitor's voice, slow down. Breathe. Focus. He opened his eyes and began. Question after question, he applied every lesson. Patience from the mop, precision from the glass, silence from the library, resilience from the failures, courage from the midnight test. Hours passed, but Lucas didn't notice. He was in control, not of the exam, but of himself. When he finished, he placed the pen down gently, a small smile tugging at his lips. Days later, the results came. For the first time in his life, Lucas had passed, not just barely, but with excellence. His classmates stared in disbelief. His professors applauded. And William Whitmore? He stood stunned, pride hidden beneath shock. The old man muttered, "Perhaps you are my son after all." But Lucas knew the truth, it wasn't about proving himself to his father. It was about proving himself to himself. After the celebration, he found the janitor sweeping the same hallway where they first met. "You knew this would happen, didn't you?" Lucas asked. The janitor chuckled. "I only showed you what was already inside you." Lucas leaned forward. "But tell me, what was the secret all along?" The janitor paused, his eyes warm, his voice calm. "The secret, Lucas, is simple. Success doesn't come from money, tutors, or power. It comes from discipline, humility, and the courage to keep going when the world calls you a failure." Lucas smiled, his chest full. The secret wasn't magic, it was transformation. If you believe discipline and humility are the true secrets to success, smash that like button and comment, "I know the secret," right now. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories.